everyone. Welcome into our June Lunch and Learn session. Today, we're going to be learning how to tighten up your client meeting workflows. So I'm guessing that a lot of you spend a lot of time planning, completing, executing your client meetings. Today, let's head on into the agenda. We're going to be talking about the importance of a structured meeting process, the impact that this has on your client experience, and then finally, the how-tos of planning your meeting workflows to ensure that everything goes really, really smoothly. Let's introduce your speaker. Many of you already know Ron Gorodetsky, COO and co-founder of Hubly. Ron is going to draw today from a lot of personal experience on planning, delivering, and executing client meetings. And I'm really excited to learn how he does it all today. If you don't know me, my name is Liv. I'm the community and support manager at Hubly. I'm going to be just here on the live chat and in the Q&A. I'll answer some questions if they come up throughout the Lunch and Learn today, if they're easy answers for the chat. And if it's going to require a little bit more talking, we'll save it to the end, and I'll be facilitating a live Q&A with Ron at the very end of the session. So let's get it going.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Olivia. Thanks for joining, everyone. I see that the attendance has stabilized there. So excited to see a full house here for the Lunch and Learn. As Olivia mentioned, I've been focused with the rest of my team for the last 2 years, really on working with advisors and their teams to help make sure that the personalized service that you create for your clients, when you're a small team or a solo advisor, is that same personalized experience that you can deliver at scale. And that's really because it's that experience that made clients choose you and to work with you in the first place. They enjoyed that in the beginning, and it's something that I hear time and time again from advisors, especially as they build out their teams, especially as their book of business grows beyond their own reach, about how do you make that scale, and then how do you also adapt and adjust to the changing client expectations that reflect the realities of the world and the markets around us. So those changing client expectations and those changing market conditions create both opportunities, but obviously also can manifest themselves as challenges in your own business, unless they are reflected and prepared for in the structures that you create to get your team ready. From our perspective, working with a lot of different firms, we see a couple of shifts happening in client expectations that are nothing new to you, most likely. They've been happening for a while now, but they're really coming to a head in the last 6 to 12 months, especially since the pandemic and especially now these economic conditions. That first shift that we're seeing is this greater push towards this expectation of their financial advisor and your team being the client's project managers for their finances. And that goes beyond just investment management. That goes into the implementation and really review and maintenance of those financial plans and the financial planning topics that are of most importance when the clients come to you to begin with. This leaves you responsible for managing multiple aspects of your clients' financial lives. I likely don't even need to bring that up because we hear time and time again how that keeps you up in the middle of the night or wakes you up in the middle of the night with a jolting memory that you forgot something or something needs to happen next month that would have otherwise slipped through the cracks. And also, we see a lot of excitement from advisors and from financial planners and associate advisors and client service managers that we work with, because a lot of these expectations changing result in the introduction of new services, which is exciting. But that's what you get in this profession to do, and that's what we're here to help you with. Now, the big question is, how do you grow your capabilities without diminishing your capacity? Capabilities to introduce new services, capabilities to introduce new team members into the mix, and eventually new advisors probably to take on a part of your book of business once that becomes so large that it grows out of hand. It's a big question. I don't promise you a full answer in a short Lunch and Learn format, but we're going to take a look at it from the approach of operational excellence when it comes to your meeting structures and workflows. From what we see, both working with firms and looking at the data and statistics behind our product, we see that there are three main points of impact for good operational excellence. One is the obvious one, is scale. When you invest into your structures, your operating structures behind something as I'd say recurring, especially as your client meetings and reviews, this allows you to deliver those at scale a lot easier than if you're trying to juggle a lot of different things like spreadsheets, to-do list apps, project management tools, etc. The second and a really important one is repeatability. It's important that every single client that works with you gets that same experience. Of course, as your business grows, you might consider segmenting your book of business based on AUM, based on client needs, based on the plan that they subscribe to you on if they're paying monthly. But for each of those clients in that segment still, it's important that that experience is repeatable and consistent. And the last is visibility, because a lot of the work that you do between your client meetings, leading up to your client meetings, and following your client meetings is what many in this industry refer to as shadow work. It is work that needs to happen, creates immense value for your clients, but your clients never hear about. And that's often the case because there's no single place for you to look to actually see a snapshot of what has your team done over the last 3 months, 6 months, 12 months for this client, for this household, for this segment of your book of business. And so the more you actually know what you've accomplished and the easier it is to see that visually, the easier it is for you to create visibility both to yourself, to your team, and eventually, obviously, to your clients so they can see the value that you're delivering to them. And for today's Lunch and Learn, we're really going to be focusing on those ongoing clients, that ongoing experience. So for us today, it all starts with streamlining those client review structures. So how do we get there? As with everything that we do, if you've attended Lunch and Learns before for Hubly, you probably see we try to simplify things down into clear-cut structures. And for us, when we look at your client reviews at scale, we see that really break down into three main areas. A structured approach to meeting preparation. We hear this time and time again when some firms come to us and we ask, how far in advance do you prepare for these meetings? And sometimes we get a giggle or a laugh saying half an hour or an hour before. And more we are hearing, well, we like to be basically looking at who we're meeting with about a week out. We want to make sure that we get the most up-to-date information. That way we're able to contact the clients, get an updated tax returns for last year, or whatever other information you determine is needed in your preparation. And so structuring those preparation steps is not only going to allow you to be consistent in those asks for your client and prepared, walking into the client meeting knowing more about their financial lives than they do, hopefully, but also as your business scales and as you bring on interns or new team members, it's going to be very efficient and very easy to operationally delegate the preparation steps and the pre-meeting steps over to somebody else in your team while still keeping that consistent and repeatable. The second is really making sure that your meetings are topic driven. We see a lot of different approaches when it comes to that. We see some schools of thought around implementing these theme-based annual service calendars where you cover different topics thematically at different times of the year. That makes a lot of sense because at the end of the year, you're doing a lot of year-end activities. At the beginning of the year, you're doing a lot of tax activities. In the middle of the year, it leaves you with a little bit of time and flexibility to cover those ongoing long-term financial planning topics for your clients. But whichever way you approach those topic-driven meetings, it's important to track which topics you plan to cover, because maybe you haven't covered them in a while, or because they're seasonally relevant, and to make sure that once you do cover them, the last step, you're able to capture the items that come out of those, and you're able to actually either yourself make sure they get executed on, or ensure that your client follows up with you on their next steps, or make sure that your team takes that from your plate and follows through with it. executing on those deliverables and those action items and client projects that come out of those topic-driven meetings. Sounds complicated. We're going to try to break it down for you as best we can in this Lunch and Learn, and we're going to show you a demo in just a second. In that demo, I want you to pay attention to three main values that the structure is going to allow you to provide. That first one, as I already mentioned a couple of times, is consistency across your book of business, across your client segments, across your team members that are working on or responsible for that part of the process. The second is reliability, both from you and your team, knowing that you can reliably see how far along each client is at in each stage of the process, but also when you zoom out to the big picture, that you can both ensure that all of your clients are going through and getting service throughout the year. And from a client's perspective, because they only have one advisor, yourself, they are confident that your team is reliable. You follow through, you're on top of it. And that leads to trust. So let's pay attention to those three main areas when we jump into that demo and see it in action in my hub. Now, I know that some of you are also Hubly users on this call. Actually, quite a few of you are. So if you are a Hubly user and you do have a screen that allows you to have two things open at once, I do recommend at this point that you open up a new tab in your web browser and navigate to app.myhubly.com. If you're not a Hubly user yet, then keep your eyes on this main Zoom window, and I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my screen here. Awesome. Just want to give a moment there for anyone to log in and find their client review meeting workflows. So we know that before Hubly, for those of you who are not Hubly users or new to Hubly, you probably think of your client review, scheduling, preparation, and follow-up as one very long workflow. You have your scheduling steps, you might be reaching out, calling them, you might be using Calendly, either sending it to the client or internally to just help you automate away some of those calendaring, adding the Zoom link, sending pre-meeting emails. You might also then have your preparation steps. So what do you want to do before a meeting? What do you want to look at? That pre-meeting email that you want to make sure goes out to the client. And then you might have your post-meeting steps, the saving the notes, the capturing action items, etc. When we bring this into Hubly, we always do the same thing. We try to think through, especially those longer workflows or longer processes, and think about where do they break down. So what are the logical stages or gates that your clients should visually pass through so that you know who are you still in the scheduling stage with? Whose meetings are coming up and need to be prioritized for preparation? Whose preparation is done and you're ready to basically cover the topics that you've planned out in the meeting? And then whose meetings are over and you're on the way to following up, executing on the next steps and action items and projects, and then marking that as complete and waiting for the next cycle. So quarterly, biannually, annually, whichever cycle you use for your business or that segment of your business. And so we really start there. We broke that down to 4 simple stages, which naturally just, when displayed here on our Hubly screen as this kind of report of all the clients in our meeting preparation workflows, makes it first and foremost easy to see which clients are where bottlenecks are or our volume is right now. And then that also makes it easy to separate up our tasks in that long, never-ending workflow into these 4 stages so that each of these scheduling, prep, meeting topics, and follow-up just have a concise list of tasks that you need your team to work through and bookmark the progress that they're making through each stage. You can do the same thing. If you're using Hubly, we've already given you probably this workflow template to start with. If you're not a Hubly user yet and you're curious to try this out for yourself as well, you can try to do this in Excel. You can try to make 3 or 4 different tabs and then lay your tasks out along the top so you can see the clients down the left side, and then check the progress you make for each of these workflows. Of course, it's not as integrated, but it will help you accomplish that same idea of being able to see and break down which clients and where and how far along are they as you bookmark your way through that stage. So as we mentioned today, we really want to focus around that structured meeting preparation. And that doesn't mean creating a never-ending list of tasks just because you can create structure there. It's actually quite the opposite. So when we take a look at the best practice template that we've created here, we actually try to make it as concise as possible. The idea being that your team and yourself, you probably know what you need to do to complete each of these different stages of the meeting preparation. When you review action items from the previous meeting, you're going to be looking at your meeting notes. You're going to be looking at that client card in Hubly to see basically what's the service record that's happened between now and the last meeting. What are some of the workflows that are still in play, haven't been completed yet? What are the ones that have been completed? So you're taking a quick synopsis of what's been done, what's still outstanding, and any outstanding items that need to get accomplished or followed up on. Hubly allows you to capture them for that client and save them right there in that meeting preparation workflow. That's why when you're planning the steps, you want to keep them very high level, leaving room to make this workflow longer for individual clients that have more outstanding items. You want to also identify the meeting topics that need to be reviewed at this next meeting. For that reason, we create this workflow for the meeting topics, where you can actually break down all the different topics, all the financial planning and investment management topics, and just client maintenance activities that you need to do once every so often in client meetings. In our case, we just break these down as topic-based tasks. In your case, you can actually use descriptions on a task to capture, of course, the additional detail and instruction for you, for your team, of what you need to do, both leading up to and during the meeting, to review, in this case, the financial plan, and which software out of the many software that you currently use do you need to go to? And you can bookmark that in as a link right into the task itself. So planning out these tasks and structuring out these workflows in such a way that makes it easy for you to follow, but not tedious in the sense that there are dozens of tasks, is going to really help you once you start adding clients into these workflows. And of course, you want to have that follow-up stage where you capture a couple of the important items that you need to do and follow up to every meeting. Saving those notes, capturing the new activities and action items, and assigning them to your team or assigning them to yourself. Sending that meeting follow-up email to the client, updating any relevant client information that's changed. And if you think 3, 6, 12 months in advance, and your client likes to book meetings in that early, you might also schedule that next meeting date if that's something that your team or you like to do. So that's the start. We've broken apart that long list of tasks into these 4 stages. We've simplified the tasks to help us better bookmark the progress that we make without inundating and overwhelming ourselves with a never-ending list of tasks to check off for every single client, because this is a high volume workflow. You don't want your job to feel like a professional task completer. You want this to support the work that you do and then give you just enough detail to do that and to see where you need to go to accomplish that step. And now we're going to do the last step, which is to try it out with a real client. So once you schedule that next meeting and you add the client in for the preparation steps, you want to walk through and you want to see if this workflow as you planned it makes sense in real life before you add in dozens and dozens of clients, because then you're going to be changing things and it's going to take a little bit longer than it should. So in this case, we're going to add our first client in and we're going to see if this works. Reviewing action items from the previous meeting. We see it's assigned to myself. As I mentioned, you can capture additional instructions, even bullet point steps of every single element that you review or you'd like your team to review in the description of the task. And this way, when all of these subtasks are done, you can just check off that stage of this preparation workflow, bookmarking that that's been done. And then, of course, you can leave your notes if there are specific things that you just want to capture but aren't necessarily tasks. And in Hubly, you leave those notes for yourself, for your team members, simply as a comment on that specific task. And comments save back into your CRM. Or if there are specific action items that you determined are outstanding or haven't been done or met, maybe it's from your team, most likely it's something you're waiting on from the client, you can go ahead and either capture those action items as additional tasks. Maybe you need to update their beneficiaries. And of course, in Hubly, you can customize these workflows. And that's why you want to keep them short in the templates so that you can customize them for individual clients as you actually work through these steps for them. Any changes that I'm making in here are not going to impact any of the other clients that get added to this workflow. They're just changes to this one client, this one time. What you can also do, if you're waiting on something from the client, you can capture that. For example, that's why I have a task here to send the pre-meeting email to my client, giving them both instructions of what we need to get updated before they come into the meeting and any topics we're going to cover. And so you can actually add a description to that task and say that you're actually missing from your client is, for example, the 2021 tax return, if there's a spouse, or if it's just that one client. And so you can actually build out the future tasks before you get to them as you go through these simple steps. And so as you make these changes, again, these are just changes to this one client card. And if you do determine as you go through this first workflow for the first client that something needs to change for all clients, maybe you're missing a step. I see there's a question in there. So if you find that you're missing a step, this is why you're actually trying this out for one client first. You can go into the workflow itself, you can edit it again, and you can add that missing step. Hubly lets you add missing steps into the existing workflows for existing clients in that workflow already. But if you just want this missing step to be something that you cover for future clients that get added to the workflow, you can deselect that and hit add. And this way, it's not going to impact your existing clients. So they're not going to get that missing step. They're already in the workflow, but when you add the next client to this workflow, then they're going to get that new step that was missing to begin with. Now, the main reason why we recommend adding that first client in before you add the rest in so you can make these changes is because even though you can add missing steps to the clients already in the workflow, once you start a client in the workflow, these steps become their steps. And so you're actually not able to go through and edit them after the client's already started. So if you started 40 clients in the workflow and suddenly you want to add an email template to this follow-up email step because you realize that it's missing, you can of course add the email template and it's going to be there for the next client that you add to the workflow. But for your 40 existing clients, they're going to be there with that task that was configured when they started the workflow. I hope that answers the question that I saw in the chat there. Awesome. And if anyone else has any questions, I see a couple of hands being raised. Unfortunately, with this webinar format, the best way to ask is in the chat. And Olivia is there to answer it, and I am keeping an eye out on it best I can on the right-hand side of my screen. But basically, trying out the structure that you created for the first time is going to show you any missing gaps, anything that you might have not thought through, or anything that doesn't really make sense the way that you structured it. It's also going to show you workflows or specific tasks that are unnecessary because there's too much detail. And so in that case, you might want to actually delete and simplify the task list. We often try to push towards that simplification because that really allows you to, again, work towards having a concise list of templated tasks, giving yourself the space to then add additional one-off items or specific tasks for each client as you go through that workflow. The important step is that once you've established your workflows, once you're happy with the structures, and you've even managed that first wave of client check-ins and reviews, it's important to revisit the structure before that next wave. A couple of reasons there are really around reflecting back on the bottlenecks that might have been created or been identified as a result of working through the structure that you created. You want to make sure that if you have a team, you work with your team to get their feedback on it as well. Implement those improvements, rework these workflows before that next wave of clients. The second and an obvious one is that if between your review meetings, you actually introduce a new topic to the meetings that you review, or you change around which clients you review at which frequency, you want to make sure that you actually go in and update the appropriate tasks, appropriate workflows, and for helpful users, we have automations that help you stay on top of the right clients at the right frequencies. So you want to make sure that you do that as well on a frequent and ongoing basis. It's not nearly as much, I'd say, upfront work as planning these workflows, trying them out, and then actually using them for the first time and learning them. It's actually a very small amount of work on an ongoing basis to continue to iterate, implement improvements, and that way your client review processes, the operations behind them, are going to be strong, and your client experience is really going to reflect that. It's also going to make it easy that as your team grows, you're going to be able to go in and revise your workflows to make sure that you assign the right steps to the right people on your team who are then going to, again, bolster your own operational capacity and help you grow that same excellent client experience while remaining personalized as your business grows. For those of you on the call that are Hubly users, we do encourage you to spend some time while this is fresh to review your workflows. So take a look at your calendar, book in an hour, block off an hour when you can come back and take a look through your preparation steps, your meeting steps, and your follow-up steps in time for that next wave of client check-ins and reviews. For our existing Hubly users, if you have any questions about any of these topics, our awesome support team is always there to help you out. We're in the chat, as you know, where you can also find the help desk content that we already have created specific to our year-end reviews. And those year-end review workflows, automating your year-end reviews, are those same workflows that we reviewed today. But this content also helps you build in those automations that we didn't cover on the short lunch and learn format, as well as additional integrations with Calendly and other meeting scheduling tools that you may use. I'm going to post a link to this in the chat for our existing Hubly users or new Hubly users that would want to actually take a look at that webinar as well. It's a little bit longer form, but it will walk you through all the steps of building out these exact workflows from scratch. And for anyone who's not a Hubly user yet, but interested in starting a conversation, we do encourage you to book a free strategy call with our team. You can do that at myhubly.com. And that's a great format to ask questions, get answers, and see a demo specific to the needs that you have in your business. If you do have questions, please do put them in the chat, and Olivia will bring them up to my attention. So
yeah, I was wondering if you could just really briefly circle back on showing how to hyperlink the link section of the task descriptions.
Awesome, for sure. So I think a really good example of that is actually in the client review scheduling workflow. So the scheduling tasks are pretty straightforward. Typically, it's your email and your call on your client to get their availability and schedule a time. You might be following up if you don't get a hold of them, and then you're recording that next meeting date and time. So oftentimes we see a lot of firms implement a scheduling tool like Calendly, Schedule Once into their business to either help their clients find availability more easily or to help their team so that you don't need to actually share these links publicly. You actually use them as a resource internally so that your team can see the right availability for the right type of meeting And then they can simply schedule the right meeting right there in Calendly or in Schedule Once or Acuity. So this is a good example for bookmarking those links, because oftentimes there are different Calendly links or different scheduling links depending on the meeting type or the advisor or team member that they're going to be meeting with. So to bookmark a link into a task, you just go and edit that task description or add a new one. And again, you just go down to the link section at the bottom of the description, where you're able to add a bookmark, name that link, and save it. Links that are added to a task will appear below the task, and they're easy to open up in a new tab or send to your client if that is a client-facing link that you want to share. The same is true for your meeting topic workflows. And so in that workflow, you might want to actually bookmark your custodian for the AUM fee review or your financial planning software for your financial plan review. And you would just do that again by adding a task detail in this case, bookmarking a link, and this way that software is going to be within reach at your fingertips when you need to go to that specific task in the workflow. Awesome question. Anything else that came up?
I know we already talked a little bit about customizing workflows for specific clients. I don't think that we went over this, but I also know that we can rename individual workflows for specific clients. I think that's a really cool feature. I'm wondering if you can also just show how to do that, because that's a very underutilized feature that we offer.
For sure, and I can see that being really important for those seasonal meetings. So if you have your year-end reviews or your tax meetings at the beginning of the year, you might want to make sure that when you're looking back at that meeting in that client's service history, which is basically a list of workflows that they've went through leading up to today, that service history reflects the actual meeting type or meeting name the client was in. So you can do that in Hubly after you add the client to the workflow, just by going in to that menu next to the workflow's name that you want to rename, selecting rename, and in this case, we can say year end, or that doesn't make any sense, mid-year review follow-up. This way, for that one client, this workflow is going to be called the mid-year review follow-up. The tasks are the same. As you can tell, they didn't change anything, and that also did not rename the workflow for all of your clients. If you want to be able to see the workflow's name in this preview in the client tile, you can do that in Hubly as well. You can actually just edit the appearance of those client tiles for that specific workflow and just enable the workflow name to show up. So this way, you can see at a glance that these are the follow-up steps for the mid-year meeting. And for example, if you had a client lagging behind from the year-end meeting back in November and December of last year, you would know it's someone that you want to prioritize and send to the top for your team to take care of. Awesome. Well, we always love to hear topic ideas. So if you have any topics that you'd like us to cover in a short lunch and learn format, or in a longer webinar format, or even fireside chat with thought leaders or existing Hubly customers, please do let us know in the chat. Send it publicly. We'd love to hear it. And if you have any other ideas for us as well, you can always get in touch. If you're a customer, message us in the support chat. And if you want to get in touch, you can always schedule a strategy call if you're not a customer yet. So I want to say thank you to everyone for spending your lunch with me. Really appreciate it.